Welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. Today, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on business with Kris Kelly, CEO of Velocity Electronics. Kris, thanks so much for joining me today.
I really appreciate you having me, Greg. Looking forward to a lively discussion and hopefully you can bring some value to listeners.
Absolutely, because I think it will be lively and tremendous value because we're going to dig into the most expensive line item that isn't on your PO. And as the show description says, that most procurement teams, they spend a lot of hours negotiating the lower component costs. Yet the big threat to profitability, it really doesn't appear on that purchase order. And it's things like downtime, supply disruptions, quality issues, any last minute issues, and that can cost far more than just like a slightly higher price. So, Kris, before we unpack all that and get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your own personal journey, and then tell us a little bit about Velocity Electronics and why you guys are so focused on this.
Okay. My name is Kris Kelly. I am the president and CEO of Velocity Electronics. I was raised in Southern California, small beach town, Ventura, and attended college, and I'm a proud alumni of Baylor University, Sikkim Bears. And moved to Austin in 1995 through a invitation from a friend of mine who was working in independent distribution. And at that time, I was currently working for AT&T in outside sales. And he said, "Hey, this is a really unique industry that's starting to grow, and I think it'd be great for you to come down and see if you would fit in." So I did that. I was with that particular company from 1995 to 2001. In 1999, the person that invited me to come down and join this company started Velocity Electronics. Um, and I had a non-solicit non-compete clause in my contract, so I sat out my 2 years, and then in 2003 joined Velocity Electronics. And at that point in time, it was a 20-person company, one office here in Austin, Texas. And over the next 24 years, we built that into multiple offices globally, operating, and I think it's 13 different countries with three different distribution centers. And we were recently acquired April 1st of 2025 by Jabil, which is one of the largest EMS providers in the world. So we've completed our first 12 months of integration with them, and really looking forward to the future and how we can continue to shape supply chain going forward.
Why don't you dive a little bit deeper into what EMS is and what Velocity Electronics actually does?
Right. So EMS is electronic manufacturing services. It's sometimes referred to as contract manufacturing, and it's a multifaceted business. And it originated by working on buying the parts and populating the boards for OEMs all over the world, and has evolved over the last 30 years or so into full system integration, partnering with OEMs to tackle their supply chain challenges, and more of an end-to-end solution, I would say. Velocity Electronics is a global distributor of board level electronic components. So where there's a need, we go out and we find components for people to build with. Additionally, though, we're a value-added service supplier, and we've moved more into the service side of the business in the last decade or so. So providing long-term solutions for our partners, whether that be last-time buy opportunities or vendor-managed inventory or excess mitigation, supplier and vendor consolidation, instead of just being the person that goes out and finds them hard to find parts.
Well, so as you're getting into, as you've evolved, as the company's evolved and started to take on all those services, I think you've been able probably to shape that total cost of procurement. Um, and that extends far beyond just that component price. Why don't you explain to us what the true cost of procurement is and how you really influence that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think whereas 15 to 20 years ago, more of our partners were interested in what is the piece price that we're buying from you, and how can we effectively control our costs on the board by buying that particular component for less than we could buy it from, say, franchise distribution or manufacturer direct, even. And I think what it's evolved to now, where we sit, and a lot of this is driven by what's happening with AI, and where we talk about a true paradigm shift in what's happening, where we almost have two separate supply chains now. You have the hyperscaler supply chain, and you have all the other verticals that are competing for space at the fab for components. And I think what's really critical is, how do we have conversations with our partners that help them manage through the life cycle of their products, and actually become an integral part in their supply chain. And I think we hear a lot now about, you need to have a resilient supply chain. You need to be agile. And I agree with all those things, but I think the critical factor in effective supply chain management is optionality. And what I mean by optionality is, when you're looking at who you're going to partner with from a channel perspective, does that particular partner provide you with a lot of options for procuring those specific components? And that could be regional optionality, that could be channel optionality, that could be anything that actually affects the overall cost of what that board is. And that could be cost in time to market. So if you know you have X amount to do in one quarter, and all of a sudden you get a lead time push, and now you're outside that quarter, what kind of optionality do you have to be able to go out and procure those particular gated items to be able to get that component to market and and be paid? So I think it's much more than just looking at a manufacturer part number and being able to fulfill. It's it's really become, how do you manage the different parts of the supply chain, and whether that's new product introduction, all the way to obsolescence management, when you know you're doing a redesign, but you need to be able to have components for the next 3 to 5 years while you're going through the redesign. How do you make sure you bridge that gap? Who do you partner with to be able to manage that? Logistically, how does that get moved around the globe? Is it going to be just you OEM direct, or is it going to be through your EMS partners? And so I think understanding the overall picture is really critical. And due to the globalization of the way the supply chains are, we talk a lot with our partners about, you have to have global reach, you have to be regionally focused, and you have to have local experts that are in the areas where the manufacturing is actually going on, to make it happen effectively. And a lot of what I see out there is, well, we have 13,000 vetted suppliers in our system. And so, because we have a lot of suppliers, that means we should be able to help you more effectively. And I would argue that it's not the number of suppliers you have, it's it's about the optionality you have within that supply base of different opportunities to procure product, which creates continuity of supply for your end partner. So it's not necessarily a case of where more is better. This is more of, do I have the right ones, so when it gets really tight and it gets really critical, that our company has the ability to go out and maintain continuity of supply for our partners to get them through their build cycle.
So maybe you could give us a few examples of the optionality you're describing. When you say suppliers and you're saying that those numbers, immediately my head goes to, well, there's just a lot of people selling different parts and things
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
Explain to us what some of those options are and which ones are really pivotal.
Right. So if we look at the overall um, ecosystem of the marketplace, you have the original component manufacturers, which would be people like Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, NXP, ST Micro, Infineon. And then you have the second channel, which is franchise distribution, which would be companies like Arrow, Avnet, WT, WPG, um, TTI, DigiKey. And then you have what we call open market sourcing, which are companies like Velocity. And if if I'm one of the top, let's say 2 to 4% of the companies in the world, I can buy directly from the manufacturer, and I buy off a lead time, buy off a demand. Um, if I'm not, then I have to go through the franchise distributor based off of who the OCM is franchised for and place my orders off of lead time and and a different pricing than I would probably get from the OCM direct. Not in all cases, but in most cases. And if I'm a franchise distributor, I can only buy from the OCM based off of lead time, based off of price, based off of what the MPN is, based off of the vertical, based off the region that it's going into. So by optionality, I mean Velocity has the ability to buy from all channels and also from our business partners. Um, so we're able to have an overall view of what each channel is doing and and the flexibility and agility to operate in an allocated market like we're in right now. Perfect example, this spring, Micron, Samsung decide that they're going to obsolete DDR4 memory. So out comes the product cancellation notice that says, by the way, we're no longer manufacturing DDR4. We're going to move everybody into DDR5, um, which automatically created an allocation on the DDR5 because all the people are trying to move in. But what happens to the people that are in long product life cycle verticals, industrial, medical, mil aero, oil and gas, that have regulatory authorities that they have to go through to redesign a board? And now all of a sudden, my board's populated with a DDR4. Where do I get it? How do I get it? And so I think being able to have a partner that knows where to go get that, who's financially strong enough to be able to take a speculative position on that product and hold it for you over a 3 to 5 year life cycle build out while you're redesigning that product to logistically move it around the world, who understands the export restrictions, who understands the tariff implications, is really key to get back to the total cost of procurement. So if I can sell you that part for $50, but I don't know the export rules and regulations, or I don't know what the tariff impact's going to be, all of a sudden that $50 part could cost you 250, or in a worst case scenario, you don't get it at all because I didn't apply for the export license that allows me to move that into a region of the world where you need an export license to manufacture that product. So when we're partnering, we're really looking at with our partners, what are they really trying to accomplish? And what time frame do they want to accomplish that in? Where do they want to accomplish it? How do we provide them opportunity to also have, let's say they decide that they needed 5,000 units of this particular part, but after the end of the 3 years, they only needed 4,000. What do they do with the other 1,000? Well, a lot of the option would have been they just eat the other 1,000 costs. But if we provide them a mechanism to uh, mitigate that excess for them in the open market, they at least can get cost recovery, and sometimes they can even get profitability off of that part. So instead of having to blend that 1,000 pieces into the overall cost after they've already shipped the product, now they have an opportunity or and a vehicle to be able to move that product into the open marketplace and not only at a bare minimum recover the asset, but potentially make profit on that particular product as well.
Kris, Some of my clients, and actually all of the really successful clients, they all talk about total cost of ownership.
Mhm.
And to me, these are all companies that have really understand the total picture, the big picture, and they understand all the factors, just as you mentioned when you're describing optionality. I'm curious, just because you've been with the company for so long, tell me a little bit about your growth. Let's go back in time here a little bit and tell me how you evolved this way. And how did you start to really understand, okay, we need this piece and we need this piece? Because what I'm hearing is so many variables at play here. And if you, unless you've got them all, it's pretty hard to talk about the total cost of procurement. How did you, walk me through the genesis to get you to this point?
Yeah, I think in 2005, the owners of Velocity decided that they wanted to, and I would say I still give them a hard time about it. They weren't sure they wanted to be global, but they definitely wanted to ooch into the international market, and because we were located in Austin, Texas, um, the place became Mexico. So in 2005, we opened our first international office in Mexico. Um, Proximity wise, uh, it was much easier than us deciding we were going to go to Malaysia or China or Indonesia or Eastern Europe or all the other places that were booming for manufacturing. Um, and so as we ooched in, um, there was a lot of established tier one EMS customers that were in Mexico. So companies like Sanmina and Flex and Jabil and several others that were also sort of building their footprints as well. And so one of the things that we did is we hired local experts that were based in Guadalajara, and we started going down and we started having conversations with the partners on what their plans were. How were they going to expand their footprint in Mexico? What type of verticals were they going to build in those particular sites? Um, and what were going to be the challenges that they thought they were going to experience, right? Because I think challenges in this space happen at a really rapid pace. they they are always evolving, and what a challenge could have been one quarter is a completely different challenge the next quarter. So I think maintaining that level of closeness and partnership, and I think that's one of the things we defined early on is we don't refer to our partners as customers or vendors. We refer to them as partners because that is what we want to do, whether that's a supply chain partnership or whether that's a, a buying relationship with one of those customers. We want it to be as transparent as possible on both sides, whether we're buying or whether we're selling, and we want to know from them directly what the challenges are. So we opened Guadalajara. We had some success there early on. And the owners of the company said to me in 2006, "Hey, Kris, we're going to go to Asia next, and we want you to go look at Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Singapore, Shanghai, and tell us what you think." Um, so I spent about 6 months in Asia looking at different options. And I think from a risk tolerance standpoint, they settled on Singapore, um, and a lot of that had to do with American company, English language, um, high high standards for trade compliance and protection of IP and all those kind of things. So we ended up opening in Singapore, and from there we branched out into Shanghai and Shenzhen. We also opened in Penang, Malaysia. So now we were connecting the world and the different suppliers again, back to that overarching philosophy of global reach, regional focus, local experts. Um, and then we decided we were going to go into Europe after that. So that was completed the end of 2008. I spent about 4 or 5 months living in Europe as well, and creating the the footprint of what that would be. We thought Amsterdam would be a perfect spot. A lot of our competitors were in the UK, but we felt like being on the continent of Europe was more important, and it ended up being great for us because with the whole Brexit situation, if you
Yeah.
have your warehouse in the UK now, it's not as easy as if you have it in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And I think just the logistical hub of Schiphol, which is right there, um, and then the proximity to the bigger markets, right? France, Germany, Poland, um, Scandinavia. Great thing about Amsterdam is you're, hour and a half plane ride away from everybody you want to go talk to.
Yep.
So fantastic. And then we were just continually trying to build out our footprint, and whether that was headcount of people or different sales and local experts in the different regions, we just continued to do that. We originally focused on um, high reliability type verticals. So your mill aero, your oil and gas, your medical, the quality standards were much more stringent to be able to operate in that marketplace. We looked at that as a big differentiator. A lot of the customers, sorry, a lot of the partners that we worked with didn't really understand the independent marketplace, but they had a lot of obsolescence challenges. So there was a need for that. Many of our competitors in that space were focused on laptop, mobile phone, that type of thing because it was hot. This was a much nichier, um, different kind of sale, which required much more capex and investment with the certifications that were needed to be able to operate in these types of verticals. So we invested heavily in that, and I think the really cool thing, interesting thing, maybe the thing that made us look really smart is because we were able to operate in those verticals, many of the other verticals started coming in saying, well, if they can operate with the defense contractors in the US and the defense contractors in Europe and the oil and gas companies in the Gulf, their quality has to be top notch. And we want that in our supply chain because if we go back again to total cost of procurement, one of the biggest drivers of total cost of procurement is quality, failure, counterfeit. Any of those things that can derail that is a massive cost. And not just a cost of loss of build, but potential legal costs, all the other things that are involved in that. Um, and so we were able to grow our market share in some of the other verticals that we didn't ever really intentionally think we were going to be in. And as we continue to grow and we again the marketplace is always evolving, the allocations they come and they go, they generally were every 5 to 8 years prior. um, 2018 we had the MLCC shortage, so people were scrambling around needing gating items, couldn't find them, so that happened. Then we had um, the just sheer impact and magnitude of COVID,
Right.
something we never dealt with. How do we make sure first and foremost that all of our people are safe and secure in that type of environment? And that time being a global company operating on 4 different continents, extremely challenging, to make sure that first and foremost that our people were taken care of, and that they were safe. And then figuring out how do we operate in this completely different environment that no one's ever operated in. Um, and then on top of that, the massive amounts of allocation and shortages that came because of that, we were able to navigate our way through. Lots of credit goes to our people globally. Um, of all the things I think that I'm probably most proud of is just the way that our people rallied around each other, um, the way that they engaged with the customers at the local levels, even in isolation, and were able to really deliver that competitive, differentiated value that was really hard to come by during that period of time, helping people control costs, helping people um, get, because one of the other things too about total cost of procurement is if you don't have the product to build the product, that's a total complete loss.
Yeah.
So how, right? Who cares what the part costs if you can't get it and can't build the device? That's when the term golden screw became really popular, where I have one gating item and I've got 98% of the board ready to go, but I can't get that one item. Therefore, I can't manufacture. Therefore, I've got to send my people home.
Yeah.
So I'm just really proud of how we were able to navigate through that. Um, and and then I think there was interest from different parts of the ecosystem on looking at independent distribution. Arrow had previously bought an independent distributor as well. Private equity was starting to get into the game um, to acquire companies like ours. And we had been a partner of Jabil for 16 years. And I think, one of the things about Jabil that's really, really fascinating, if you look at their story, the overall growth that's happened at that company in the last 20 years is really amazing. The way they've been able to shift in and out of different markets, changing markets, different customer bases, um, different geographies, uh, and the real thing about them that I was so interested in, I feel so fortunate to be part of that, is they treat their people incredibly well internally, but they treat their supply base and their customer base as partners. Amazing amounts of transparency. Um, and you need to have that, because we can't help you if I don't really know what you need me to do, or I
Right.
don't really know what options you're looking at. But I think Jabil's transparency with that was amazing. Um, and the discussion started, and eventually April 1st of 2025, they acquired us. And we've integrated into that family. It provides us with, again, a lot of optionality in the type of product that we can procure and provide, um, and,
It,
and and a strong position in the marketplace for sure.
thank you for going through that history and the chronology. It speaks to great ability to adapt to different circumstances, but it's also a very organic story that you're telling me. Simply trying to get into new markets, you learn new things, you develop new expertise, and you build this big picture understanding of the marketplace. How do you save your customers some time? What are some of the main mistakes you're seeing procurement departments making? And I really like what you mentioned there about quality and how important that is. It's also very hard to define um, term.
Mm.
So, what would you say, considering all that organic growth? What are the biggest mistakes um, procurement departments and the people who manage them are making right now, and what can they do to correct them?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. I think the biggest sort of flaw or myth that gets perpetuated into our space is that if I'm not buying directly from the original component manufacturer or one of their franchise distributors, I'm compromising my quality. And I understand that. And I would say, depending on who your partner is, why it's really like partner selection is the most important piece of this whole scenario. But you do have the optionality, if you select the partner correctly, to be able to do things that you just simply can't do by buying from an OCM direct, or from a franchise distributor. And I think just being able to go out and have these conversations with the procurement folks, um, and share best practices with them, and help them feel comfortable that there is optionality out there, and not that it's just out there, that it is required. The supply chain, a lot of people say the supply chain's changing, and I say no, the supply chain has changed forever, and it's not ever going back to the way it used to be, where you could just order and your lead time was guaranteed, and people would store it on the shelf for you, and they would just in time it into you just as you needed it, and everything was perfect. Um, and I think the other thing that I always talk to them about is, hey, listen, I know during COVID, um, there was a lot of overbuying, there was a lot of panic buying, and you were stuck with a lot of inventory uh, at the end of that period. This is a much different evolution that we're seeing now in the supply chain from the standpoint is that it's much more demand driven. It's not supply constrained. Now, the demand driven piece of this is causing constraint in the supply base. There's no doubt about that. But this is again where we're looking at um, the fabrication companies that actually, make the components. There is just a massive push from the AI revolution and the people that are helping build that to create more space for them to be able to build the advanced circuitry. So if your product was made on 65 nano nodes, those are becoming more and more obsolete at the fab. So your people that are in that middle tech to trailing tech are having massive challenges right now on being able to get the products they need to be able to continue to build in order to do a redesign. And a lot of those types of verticals have agreements in place to service for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, even, right? So being able to have a partner that is able to operate nimbly, effectively, um, with a lot of agility in knowing where to get the product, one, but then also it's about where you are in line on being able to have leverage to be able to pull that product. Because not all companies are created equal on how they can apply pressure to 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 move product and move supply chain. So I think that's also super important too. Is you have to have the ability to um, continually have these conversations of, okay, look, you asked for this last quarter, we came in, you said you didn't want to pull the trigger on it because it wasn't cost effective, and now I'm telling you that that product has gone up 35%. So when we talk about overall cost of procurement and managing your cost, there comes a point in time when two bad things can happen. One, all the product's gone and now you don't have it. Two, you are going to have to pay more than your standard price was, but you will have the product to build. And the longer you wait and the longer you delay, the more challenging it is, even for partners like us, to be able to create that value for you by having the product on the shelf. Um, so again, I think it's about just getting out and having those conversations, being really transparent, being really candid, not trying to scare anybody, but actually letting them know exactly what's happening in this space. And if you continue to delay and you continue to procrastinate because of what the piece price is of the part, there will come a point in time when there is not any way for us to help. So,
Kris, we're at the top of the hour. We could talk about this all day long in multiple facets, but you've covered some really good ground for us. If someone wants to work with Velocity and yourself, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
yeah, my contact details are on our website. The other great way to get a hold of me is through LinkedIn. My profile is up on LinkedIn, and I do always respond when I do have inquiries. Sometimes it's different because I'm in different time zones, but I make a really strong effort to be able to try and connect and answer all the questions that people might have. Um, and then my email is kkelly@velocityelect.com. So that's also a great way to get a hold of me. And then I'm more than happy to come out and sit down in person too. with anybody that wants to have a more in-depth conversation about specific needs and challenges.
Fantastic. Well, Kris, thank you for joining us. Next time I get down to Austin, please save me a plate at the table, space at the table for some of that barbecue. I'd really appreciate it.
You bet. You're always welcome. It's a friendliest state in the union, Texas.
There you go.
All
All
right.
right. Thank you, Kris. And
Okay.
thank you, everyone. Hold on for just a second after we're done here, Kris. And
Okay.
thank you, everyone, for joining us on another edition of Thought Leaders Live. We'll catch you on the next show.